I think, exactly 20 years difference. I think. When we first met, he was 45. I think I was 25.
And when he said to you something quite unexpected, as whatever those words were, you're obviously kind of, because he is your mentor.
Right.
You look up to this man more than you look up to anyone. You're obviously thinking, well, what is this? What are you about to say?
I'll tell you how it happened, because I think it's funny. So after work, I head over to Ned's house, and of course we did the same thing after work. I'd meet him, and we'd have a martini, always a martini. He lived in a very chic neighborhood, I think, World's End, which I really loved.
I'd imagine you have a dirty martini.
I had a dirty. Well, you know me well. So I had a dirty man. And again, in his clipped accent, right, he would say, darling. Now, when he said that, it wasn't really a word of affection as much as he had something to say, or, I don't know, something interesting to say. So this is where it starts.
Or I need you to do something. David.
That's right. I need you to do something. That too. And actually, he's done that. So he went on to say that he had received a call from the palace asking if I was free this Saturday, I, meaning David Yakir, and he was told that one of Prince Philip's friends, colleagues, men in waiting, who knows what they're called, saw an article about me in one of the magazines where I was interviewed I was interviewed about the nature and future of the internet. And Ned was told that the prince was I think the word was intensely interested in the internet, and could I attend the Saturday tribute to the Boy Scouts, where the prince would be available for a conversation.
Now, can I just add something here that for the listeners that aren't aware, Prince Philip was always in the vanguard of new areas, the environment, conserving our planet. And indeed, technology. He was an absolute geek when it came to technology. And I think that this is such a wonderful part that he came out. He obviously spotted it in the late 90s, realized that the internet was going to be the future. And I love the fact that he reached out.
Yeah, I mean, as I learned when I did have the conversation with him, so we did. We saw West Side Story that night, and then the next morning, somebody knocked at the door, and it was a formal invitation to the palace, which I left there at Ned's house.
So sorry, someone knocks on the door. I mean, right. Because for me and the listeners, we haven't had invites to Buckingham Palace before.
No.
What? Who knocks on the door?
I think it was just a messenger. Like? It was a messenger.
You're kidding me.
It was a messenger. And I'll tell you, I mean, you think there's a couple of things here, and I want to get this in, otherwise we're going to have to do this in two parts, I think. Actually, we're going to have to do this in two parts. So it's a messenger but is it a messenger from the palace, or is it sent? I don't know how things are done.
But
so I know
for us, in our heads, we've got some sort of Victorian boy knocking on the door.
Is Mr. Yakir there? We have a message from the palace.
We don't know. Or I mean, why? Was it not an email? I guess emails weren't there. No. This is fascinating stuff.
So it's interesting. I hadn't really thought about that aspect of it. I just remember the door opening. And Ned, again in his clipped accent, he goes, Mr. Yakir, it's something from the palace. That's how I remember it. But it was really funny is I'm looking at it, and it's unbelievable. And there was a word in there, right? I was just astonished. I mean, your brain goes into a fog, sort of. And I was sitting there, and all of a sudden, Ned's across from me, and he goes, so, my dear boy, what are you going to wear? I don't think you can go in your jeans. Right? So this is where the journey of Cinderella starts. So Ned, being Ned, calls one of his tailors at Harrods, right, and goes, my friend David Yeck here is heading to the palace and he needs something to wear, right? And I was told to come over to Harrods, and I met this tailor, and it was one of those things out of the Princess Diaries, or one of those things, where you're sitting in Harrods and they greet you, and
these guys are well versed at dealing with people who are in your position
exactly.
Right now. Right? They're there knowing how to fit out for certain meetings, for protocol, for profiles, all the rest of it. So.
And they did. And what was so interesting is you're sitting there and they're bringing out suits. First they ask, what is the event? And I told them it was a Saturday afternoon event. So it's less formal, but you still, you have to go to the palace dressed appropriately. And they showed me all these suits and all these shirts and all these shoes. And I'm sitting there going, that one, maybe that. And they would sit there and go, no, I think this one's more appropriate for you. Anyway, I remember walking out. They tailored it. I left, had drinks with Ned. I came back. I picked it up. It was perfect. It was a very subtle pinstripe suit.
Knowing you like a certain look, was there any conflict in what they were telling you to wear to what you wanted to wear? Where was that break?
I think, it's really interesting you ask. I think I pushed everything I was about aside and had to become the person I was told I had to become.
Wow.
It was, you don't fight the style when you're doing something that very few people in the whole world would never dream of doing. But, and it was so interesting because it was followed by a haircut. And, of course, they sent me to a place that really knew how to cut hair. It just was a real fog. But I want to get to Saturday morning of that whole experience, because it was Saturday morning that all of a sudden everything hit. What was I going to say? What was I going to do? I started writing notes to myself. Well, the internet is this and that and how it works and all that. I'm writing all these notes. What am I going to say to this guy?
Was there any part of you at this point that was thinking, well, and I don't mean this to sound disrespectful to Prince Philip, because obviously he's someone that we greatly respect, but was there any part of you at that point as a disrupting force, and being the man that was the human being that was leading that change, thinking, well, actually, Prince Philip, what are you going to do that's going to help this change? I mean, where does that, how does this all come? How did it all work in your head? I mean, yes, I understand that you're blown away that it's Prince Philip, but was there a part of you that sort of thought, well, how are you going to help me and this change, Prince Philip?
Actually, I'm not sure that thought entered my mind. I think mostly I wanted to figure out in the time allotted to me how I could explain what this thing really was. Mm-hmm. I wasn't sure. A lot of people didn't have the knowledge of what this thing. They hear things, they try to go on. They didn't know. And, So
was this an opportunity through Prince Philip to open up something to the greater world? Not the early adopters, but the laggards and the late adopters. Did you see this as an opportunity to vocalize the messaging to those people?
It's not those people. It was a one-on-one conversation with Prince Philip. And I think again, it's not intimidation that you feel. You just feel like this is a once-in-a-lifetime experience, and you have to decide at that moment what you're going to do with that experience. And I think for me, it was strictly communicating what this thing was. So I think
I'm trying to understand is what you saw. I'm trying to understand where you saw this could go. I know this personal journey for you to meet him, but I'm interested in understanding, did you see Prince Philip as a conduit to get a message out to others that you might not, the laggards and the late adopters?
Well, it's interesting because this goes back to something you said earlier when you said he was always at the vanguard of things. When I researched him, I found that to be true. I did think if I could explain, remember, I knew I was going to have limited amount of time. Sure. If I could explain to him my point of view and my understanding of what the internet was, but more importantly, where it was going, what it was going to lead to. Where we ended up is a totally different story, but I think poignant in itself. Actually, let me get there. Let me get there, and you'll see how all this work played out. Because it didn't turn out the way I expected it to turn out. But I do want to go through the story, the princess
But you've got your haircut.
Right, I got my haircut. And it's Saturday morning. I have the suit. I have the haircut. I have all my notes stuffed in all my pockets. I think the seam on my pants was coming apart. I think it was made a little too tight. I don't know. Anyway, so it's a normal everyday occurrence for Ned Sherrin. A Bentley pulls up in front of the apartment, and we get ready, and we get into the Bentley. And here's really what's so strange. You're driving, and what is the street that goes right into the front palace gates? What is that, that
I don't know what the street's called. The Mall.
That leads right into the front. So we're coming down that, right? And then we go around the statues of something. I feel like a moron because I can't remember these things. But funny enough, I had this vision that the gates were going to open. The guards dressed in red would open the gates for us, and we would drive in with our Bentley, right, as royalty. But instead, you sort of go through a side door. Yeah. There's another entrance, and it was interesting. And the way it was set up, it was going to be cocktails in a ballroom, which I think was actually the theater. And then we would go out to the gardens. And so I get to the palace, and I walk in, and they do all the checks that they would have done back then. And you go through, same things you go through at the airport. And then you walk in, and my first impression was a terrible thing. I thought it was a bit tattered. There was so much furniture, but more importantly, there was more art in that just hallway than in most museums. I was so taken by the art and these huge staircases that went upstairs. And I understand the Queen wasn't going to be there. It was only going to be the Prince, right? Mm. And you walk in, and we walk in, and they're serving cocktails.
But was it a bit tacky? Because I know from Trump's... first of all, I won't get political, but Trump's visit to Buckingham Palace, that it looked all a bit too. There was too much going on. Too much art. Too much. It just looked. It looked a bit tacky.
I think it's your point of view. For me, it was what I expected a palace to look like. Besides it being slightly tattered when you looked at the sofas and the couches and things like that, they looked like they could use recovering.
It's obviously not an old building, and it's certainly not the Queen or Prince Philip's favourite building. Windsor is their
That's right.
Is their home.
That's right.
Buckingham Palace is not a very old building.
It's like going to the office with a bedroom. Anyway, no, I didn't find it tacky at all. I was amazed by the art. I mean, they must have had every queen and king and prince and princess ever to live, portraits.
This isn't where the public would go in. You are in a different area now.
I don't know that. I'm imagining that that's where the public would go through. But we did enter the ballroom, and this was an interesting experience because there was cocktails. And Ned was saying that was Prince so-and-so, that was the Duke of so-and-so, Earl, and then, 2,000 sirs, milling around with their wives and everybody being sort of not as